Hi, and welcome to Hoffman's Hot Seat. I'm Tom Hoffman with One-to-One Media, and I'm joined today by Daryl Travis, who's the founder and CEO of Brandtrust. And today, Daryl and I will be talking about different ways in which companies can rely on social sciences to help learn more about customer behaviors and their motivations. Daryl, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks, Tom. My pleasure.
So, Daryl, I thought maybe we could start there. Can you give us an idea of how companies can apply social sciences to get at the heart of customer behaviors and act on that information?
Sure. Well, everyone has customers. Everyone has a customer base, and every business is better served by understanding what customers really need. Social science tools and disciplines are terrific for helping us understand, in many cases, even the kinds of things that customers aren't aware of themselves. And so they're terrific tools to help us get to the deeper needs, the deeper motivations that customers have.
So maybe can you provide an example of either a social science that could be applied to gaining that type of deeper understanding of a customer behavior? Maybe if we go with that.
Sure, absolutely. So there's so much that's emerged in the last 2 decades or so on social psychology, and in particular behavioral economics. So behavioral economics, a lot of it driven by Daniel Kahneman, who's really sort of credited with the father of behavioral economics, has really helped us to understand that economics, as we were all taught in school, helped us to think that the human being is a rational creature and that we make our decisions based on utility. But as it turns out, which is pretty intuitive once you actually think about it, and Kahneman's work has really proved it over and over, that human beings are actually pretty irrational and pretty emotional in our decision making, and that we actually are making our decisions based on how things make us feel.
So if we think about how marketers, for example, often do draw upon survey information that customers share, what do you find are some of the shortcomings with the validity of that information or how it can be used?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's really where the biggest opportunity is, actually, because we are so dependent on surveys and asking questions. We want to ask our customers what they want, what they think, that sort of thing. And it's really important that we understand what's happening in the marketplace, but what's more important is that we understand why. But there's a big problem with that. The problem is that what we've discovered now through years of research using social science disciplines and thousands upon thousands of interviews is that if you really want to know why people do what they do, about the worst thing you can do is ask them.
So can you also provide us an example of how marketers might be able to apply this in practice?
Certainly. Like, for example, let's think about the aspect of asking questions, right, and surveys, that sort of thing. So if we're not very careful, we'll get the kind of conventional responses. So once we know that we ask people direct questions, then the way the brain works is so much of it is happening non-consciously or implicitly in terms of framing our decisions. So when we ask direct questions, we know that the non-conscious part of the brain recognizes there's reward and punishment for right and wrong answers. So the moment we pose a direct question, we cause the brain to default into what's the right answer mode. And so we'll always get those kinds of answers, those kinds of responses, in spite of the fact that might not be what's really driving their behavior.
So as a result, if we go back to the survey analogy again, when marketers do rely on survey information, or if they rely upon it too heavily, this often result in skewed results when it comes to actually trying to execute on a campaign?
Exactly, and therein lies the problem, really. So one of my favorite examples is price, for instance. So price is obviously really important to any business, to any product, and to any brand. But the issue is when you pose direct questions about price, there's really only one right answer, right? I mean, the variance could only be cheaper, lower, or maybe it'd be good if you could give it away, right? I'd appreciate that. So if that's the only basis of the information we're going on, so we're just going to continue to push our prices down and erode our margins, potentially pushing ourselves completely out of business.
Right.
But in reality, when you look around, there's no leading brand in any category that we know of that's the low price brand in the category. So obviously price is not what drives our behavior, or certainly not what drives our behavior exclusively. So those kinds of things, is understand the real motivations to allow us to address those motivations, come up with better value propositions, and build higher margin, more desirable products.
I would imagine that those motivations, if we're talking about price and other factors, that those motivations may vary depending on not only the customer, but also the type of product or segment that we're talking about.
Oh, it does, absolutely. One other behavioral economics principle that, or social psychology principle as well, that's very useful is what's called the notion of prevention or promotion. And what the social scientists have discovered, particularly Tori Higgins at Columbia University, is that most of us fall into one orientation or another. Prevention being that we're trying to avoid anything bad, right? And promotion being we're trying to accomplish anything good. And so since we naturally segment into those two kind of personality types, it influences every decision that we make. And so you can imagine the implications for advertising and marketing messages and how we approach, how we position a brand. Is it more prevention orientation or more of a promotion orientation? And understanding how the audiences segment against those various brands and products.
Okay. So for companies that have not gone down this path before and made use of social sciences for marketing purposes, can you offer some starting points for them?
Absolutely. I think it's there's some few real basic premises to start to understand. One is to understand the limitations of surveys and asking direct questions, that sort of thing. And also to spend some time studying what is really pervasive in the social sciences, which is a concept called priming. And priming is to understand that those non-conscious drivers in the brain, the things that are actually we're using to make decisions moment by moment, minute by minute, that they're very susceptible to all sorts of influences. So the way we ask the questions, the sequence we ask the questions, and so that it's more important for us to actually listen to the stories and the narratives that people tell naturally, and then to look for the patterns in there, because they're very susceptible to us misleading them or misdirecting them, and then that's when we get bad answers. We get the kind of answers that lead us astray.
And as we're talking about social sciences, I'd also wanted to ask, since a growing number of organizations are making use of social customer sentiment that's shared in social media channels about their interests and preferences and attitudes about brands and products, can you share with us some of your findings as far as it applies to using that kind of information? Are there gaps or shortcomings that marketers should be aware of?
There are gaps or shortcomings. One of the things that is a really useful concept that emerges from paying attention to the social sciences is that we should be more attuned to experimentation, that we should do more double-blind kind of experiments. So, for example, if we have this kind of a campaign, we should also test this kind of a campaign alongside of it. And we have new techniques emerging from the social sciences as well, including implicit association testing, which allows us to much more accurately test those two campaigns, rather than going with one concept and testing the acceptability of it in the top two box score kind of approach. So we can get people to say things are acceptable, but they're not saying I embrace it or I really like it.
Right.
It's
right.
something quite different.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Daryl, thank you so much for your time today.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate this.
Yeah.